suppose. Now shush. She makes the sound she makes to calm me down. Oh.
Rachel Lowry, good afternoon. Welcome to the Impact webinar series.
Nice to be here. Good to see you again, Jeremy.
My pleasure. It's such a timely moment for this conversation. Rachel, you as the Chief Conservation Officer at the World Wildlife Fund have been, I think fair to say, witnessing a really fast-growing, we hope not too late, movement towards the protection of our environment and the sustainability efforts required by businesses in Australia and globally in order to steady this ship being our natural environment. I think it'd be wonderful to sort of hear from you initially in your words. What does World Wildlife Fund do? It's obviously a well-known and much-loved brand, but having had the opportunity to speak with you before and meet some of the team, and obviously we've been in partnership now for a while, we're very humble often at how complex the work is that you do, right? And it's not simple, and there are many layers to it. So what does World Wildlife Fund actually do?
Well, our mission, that a lot of people do know when they support WWF, is to create a future where humans live in harmony with nature. But what does that really mean? I mean, what we try to do very much is tackle wicked problems, as you say, and not just shine the spotlight on them, but find solutions to them. Solutions that work for people, solutions that work for climate, solutions that work for nature. Trying to find those win-wins. It's easier said than done. Having said that, there are plenty of them out there. Quite often you need the political will to back them in. So we will develop what we call theories of change to try to get that political will behind those solutions. Sometimes you need corporations to, want that sort of market-based transformation. So we will work with corporates. We'll sit at the table and negotiate and put solutions forward. Sometimes it's about rolling up our sleeves and picking up a shovel and, getting out there on the ground and putting practical solutions forward. We do what it takes to try to get the right solutions in the right landscapes and seascapes at the right time.
What inspired you to want to work with the World Wildlife Fund?
Oh, I mean, I've always been a naturalist at heart. I think my window into loving nature was what a lot of people, sort of the portal a lot of people use. I loved animals. I really did. As a kid, I was just obsessed with animals, domestic or wild. I just couldn't get enough of them. And so the idea of being able to make a living and earn a paycheck helping wildlife has always been something I've tried to pursue. I worked as Director of Wildlife Conservation and Science at Zoos Victoria for a long time. And I loved that job too, being able to help breed and release wildlife and run important campaigns and educate people through the zoo. But I was craving being able to lean into a broader agenda, being able to be at the cutting edge science of climate science and understand the problems really, in a very sophisticated way, and sit with the right networks, with a great brand like WWF, with a great talented, support network around the world, really, and try to work with good people to get good things happening.
So in this time, and I think it's fair to say this is a fragile time, I think you would agree with that, in respect to what we do now perhaps matters more than ever before. Are you hopeful? And if so, why?
Yes, I am hopeful. I'm still keeping my eye on that 2030 deadline. I talk about loving animals. Of course, my dog's just woken up, sorry. I keep my eye on that 2030 deadline. Almost all eminent scientists that I speak to say that's where, a lot of our modelling says if we haven't sorted things out by 2030, we are in a new world of pain, but we've still got this window.
Now, sorry, Rachel, sorry to jump in. Can you just explain what that 2030 deadline means?
Yeah, so we've got this.
What are we looking out for?
The world has, nations all around the world have signed on to and agreed to try to work towards these sustainable development goals. These milestones that by 2030, we really seriously need to be achieving if we're all going to be okay. We're going to be all right. And that includes things like keeping our climate warming below 1.5 and stabilising climate. It includes the amount of landscape and seascape we've got to protect. There's a lot involved in those sustainable development goals, and it's not just about nature, it's about our social indicators. There's a lot involved in those sustainable development goals. We're not on track right now to meeting those sustainable development goals by 2030. But I have hope that we can get there because we've done amazing things in the past. When you look at us as a species, the human species has sent man to the moon. We've invented Wi-Fi, so I get to sit here with my dog from my home and talk to you today. In Australia, we invented the solar cell. We invented FPOS. We are quite remarkable when we put our minds to it. I think that there lies the challenge at the moment is I don't want us sleeping on the job. There is a lot to do between now and 2030. There's about 71 months. And we've got some heavy lifting to do to turn things around, particularly with the biodiversity crisis, particularly with the climate crisis.
I appreciate you talking in respect to species because that really defines the fact very clearly that we are one species of many. We're a very smart monkey. In fact, it's our brains which distinguish us. We don't excel in many other talents such as strength and eyesight and all those things which many other animals are better at us in achieving. But our big brains are going to be required. And in fact, one thing we may be good at is when our backs are against the wall, if you look at how quickly we were able to respond to COVID, we did things which a week earlier we would not have thought possible, i.e. large corporations suddenly had all their teams working from home. So it seems that when we're in a crisis, we are able to collaborate uniquely and powerfully as a species. But yet at the same time, we're the only species capable of destroying the environment that sustains us. I mean, no other animal does that to my understanding. So what do you believe makes us so uniquely capable of destroying the environment that does predicate our existence? And why do you think this might be the case? I know it's a complex question, but I'm just love to hear your thoughts on that.
No, I feel like it's a fascinating way to frame it. I mean, I think there'd be some biologists potentially on this call that would be thinking there's some pretty gnarly pest species out there doing some damage alongside the human species, cane toads, cats when they're in the wrong area, little yellow ants and so on. So I'm not sure we can own it all on our own, but why I think we're so dramatically good at that destruction at scale is because of where we sit on the food chain. We're up there at the apex, and so it's so much easier to visualize the destruction that we're doing. That's for sure. And the rate of destruction is what I think is most alarming because we have population growth and we have unsustainable growth. It's not just about numbers, it's about how we choose to live our lives. And there lies a big part of our challenge.
I've just come actually from a retail breakfast talking about sustainability and the extent to which businesses are wanting to do good genuinely, and yet at the same time operating within a system where they still need to deliver those returns for shareholders. How does World Wildlife Fund think about this? Because you engage a lot of corporates. Indeed, through our partnership, we're helping fund your work. How are you seeing the interplay between kind of human self-interest and the innate existential need to also protect our environment?
Look, I think first of all, like, yay to having corporates out there that are wanting to do good, because let's be honest, not everyone does want to do good, and so having that want, and I do believe it's building. I saw it. I went to Montreal last December. I was at the biodiversity COP there and the negotiations. The number of corporations that flew to Montreal to be part of the global biodiversity framework negotiations was tenfold on 2 years prior. It's a big deal, you know. It's growing. People see the need to lean in. So good, we need to keep cultivating that want, because that's where it's got to start. And then we have to start being quite disciplined around our decision making. There are regenerative solutions. There are these win-wins. Is it good for business? Is it good for people? Is it good for nature? You know, is it good for climate? We've got to start using those frames and rewarding corporations that do it well. Some corporations are certainly seeing it as an opportunity to be a front runner. They see mandatory disclosures around biodiversity coming their way off the back of the GBF negotiations, that global biodiversity framework. We've just seen, our first, what people call climate election in the last 18 months here in Australia. There is this awakening around post bushfires, post climate, in the midst of a climate emergency. So some businesses are seeing it as an opportunity to be the front runners. But if it was easy, we'd be doing it broad scale. And so this is where I think we need to support one another, but be disciplined, not fall back into the old paradigm of what's going to get growth and revenue hardest, fastest for shareholders. And that's not necessarily the right way. The right way could be maybe a slower path, but more reward at the end, because we're going to, see people getting rewarded for business when they're benefiting people, benefiting wildlife, benefiting wild places.
Are you seeing that in your work where there's less focus on that immediate win, the quarterly revenue targets, and increasingly an understanding that actually, unless we have a longer term view on this issue, unless we understand that cumulatively our efforts are going to add up to meaningful change, because if we don't, we're actually looking at, potentially fast tracking an extinction experience, in which case, there won't be communities around to buy our products and services. And so do you think there's kind of a growing awareness of how urgent and important this time is? And therefore, that's kind of the premise of those broader conversations. We need to create the partnerships. We need to establish the frameworks so that we can work together to achieve these goals.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing more and more of it. I'm seeing also corporate partnerships with NGOs like WWF that are longer term, more at scale, more willing to lean in and tackle the wicked problems and not just sponsor a cute and cuddly animal. WWF just launched a partnership with Hewlett Packard, and it's one of the multi-millions of dollars over years tackling big deforestation issues at scale. That's exciting. Those sorts of partnerships are what we need to see more of, cross-sectoral partnerships. I'd love to see more cross-sectoral collaboration quite often. Even within certain sectors, so sometimes you'll get a major bank reach out, but maybe not all the major banks want to work together, or one supermarket chain, but they don't all want to work together because there's still a competitive corporate environment we've got to be mindful of. So there's still work to do there. And I think that's where government needs to step in. We've got to incentivize, make it easier as well for these sorts of partnerships to be unlocked, and to reward those that are doing it well.
What's your experience? I know you run trips taking people and teams into the forest, into the natural world to kind of reconnect and see the work that you're doing. I mean, from my perspective, I think a simple way to frame our ability to destroy our environment is because we're not connected to it. We've isolated ourselves largely in suburbs and cities where we don't see the direct impacts of our choices. And yet the irony is we all feel a yearning to return to nature, be at the local park, or, if we go hiking on the weekend. And so that there's an innate human need to surround ourselves with a natural environment. What are you seeing in respect to when you do take teams, you do provide that immersive experience, how it opens up a bigger conversation?
Yeah, there's nothing quite like getting people out there, standing in the forest you're trying to motivate people to protect, or, on a boat on that seascape, looking down at the corals that you're trying to avoid bleaching, for example. There's nothing quite like it. I agree. There's certainly more and more disconnection from nature, and there's plenty of research out there that proves that we're not meant to be just sitting as digital beings online all the time. And as soon as we go on holidays, we go out and seek it, and then we come back. Having said that, we've got good research to also show people care. We might not be as connected. We might not be as front of mind. We're not, immersing ourselves in. Some people are calling it forest therapy or vitamin nature. We're not getting out there and really taking the time to just be as much as we should out there in that natural environment. But that doesn't mean people don't care. We've seen post bushfires, for example, because it was very visible. It was alarming what happened here in 2019, 2020 in Australia. Care was, factor was through the roof. Australians were very much like, if this is a window into the climate crisis, I want nothing of it. And, to the point where the current federal government of the day were just too slow to act. And that was remiss of them. So people definitely care, but there are just other factors as well, Jeremy. I think cost of living is something we can't underestimate at the moment, is playing out. It's hard for everyday Australians at the moment to start to look to the future. And, I'd love to think everyone's sitting around a dinner table tonight saying, what charity are we going to support next? Because I'm an executive director at a charity and I see the important work of civil society, but I also know that they're probably not necessarily the economic times that we're in, and we're going to have, that's going to have ramifications for the good work of charities, which is why the work you lead is going to be so important, because we do need to make sure we're finding ways to continue to direct revenue and funds into civil society so that we can get good work done. And I think there's a lot of variables. It's not just about getting people out there in nature, although it helps. I think it's about providing bite-sized solutions that people can take on. Sometimes people just feel so overwhelmed by the scale of it. They think, I don't know where to start. I'll think about that tomorrow, or I'll work that out. And then life gets busy. We get back to juggling kids and family and work and everything else.
Yeah, I think that's such a key point. There is a sense of overwhelm and a sense of how can I as an individual make a difference? And we'll talk about that shortly. I'm wondering if you could share with us an example of small interventions or actions that people can take that cumulatively will make a lot of impact. But through your expertise, you see to be key sort of, whether it be projects or small things people can do that is in fact meaningful.
Yeah. I mean, there is so much. This is the thing, but we do have to trust that it's when lots of us do it that we get the real impact. And I think that's the challenge when we're in our home and we decide to tackle our food waste, for example, which is a way of tackling climate change, tackling food waste. When you just feel like you're the only person doing it, that can be a little demotivating. But if we think about we all tackle it right across society, that's a big impact right there. So there are everyday sort of home-based actions right down to, as a consumer, where we're buying our, doing research. I often say to people, pick one food commodity. The way we produce our food is a big destruction point right now for biodiversity. It really is. When you look at what's really pushing land clearing in Australia, across the east coast of Australia, the production of beef is pushing tree clearing really rapidly, faster than any other variable in the country. So start there. Where are you getting your beef from? Is it from a deforestation-free beef producer? Is it produced locally? Is it produced overseas? Start with one food commodity at a time. We're so powerful with where we put our money as consumers. That's one way to do it. Pick a charity that's doing great work, that's values aligned, and support them, because civil society plays a critical role. And then, I often say, speak up. Speaking up, your MPs listen. Their livelihood depends on listening to you because they want to get voted again. It actually often doesn't take that many people to speak up on an issue before you start to get the political will moving. But it does need to happen, and it can't always happen from people like myself that politicians expect to hear from. If something doesn't sit comfortably with you, don't just sit on it, speak up.
And can you give us an example of a large-scale project that has the sort of, to give our listeners perhaps a window into the complexities that you're also juggling?
Yeah. So, large-scale project. There's one that the beautiful one to talk about because it's so complex but equally simple in its essence. The Koalas Forever project that WWF leads. That's the aim there is to double the number of koalas by 2050. Right? It's quite a big aim when you're talking about a species that was just a year ago listed as endangered across the east coast of Australia. To address that project, we've got helping save koalas isn't rocket science. You need trees in the ground, eucalypts, that have corridors. So you can fund restoration projects. You can actually roll up your sleeves and get out there and do restoration projects. Equally, you can help by tackling your beef issue. And actually, you can ask your local politician to incentivize deforestation-free beef, for example. There are loads of corporates that can support Koalas Forever program by either, purchasing, when they look at carbon offsets, koala-friendly carbon, which is now on the market. It's about to go live. Not all carbon offsets are equal, for example. Some actually create wins for biodiversity as well. So if you're going to travel and you're going to jump on those planes and do your meetings, then do the right thing. Offset avoid the travel if you can. If you can't, offset it, but choose wisely. And so the Koalas Forever program has lots of different tentacles. It's a multi-million-dollar program. We've been able to fundraise and actually get funds from government because they really love the design of the program. We've been able to direct over $10 million into Northern Rivers region alone in the last 3 to 4 years. That's huge. And the number of trees we're getting in the ground, we'll see demonstrable change for that species along the East Coast if we can start to broaden that out across the different hubs. So that's just one example. I'm choosing the koala because they're an icon, and I truly believe if we can't get it right for the koala in this country, then what other hope do your Guthica skinks have, and your Sheoak skinks and your bawbaw frogs? It's a species we've got to get right.
Rachel, you're obviously very, very passionate about this. Is there perhaps a moment or series of moments that you could share with us about what made you realise that this was your path, that perhaps you felt you didn't have a choice, that perhaps you felt this is what you needed to do? Were there any pivotal moments in your life that you could share with us?
Yeah, look, there's probably a few. I always thought I was going to be a veterinarian because I loved animals so much. I was always outdoors. If there was a nest up in a tree, I was, climbing the tree to take a look. And everyone would say, you're going to be a vet one day. But then when I was at uni, I studied, I just discovered this world of zoology and ecosystems. And I thought, what? I remember just sitting there and thinking, oh, I wonder if I could make a living somewhere in the ecology, zoology realm. No careers counsellor at high school ever told me about being a zoologist. So that led me into studying zoology, which actually led me working at a zoo. And so another milestone moment was I started working at the zoo, and I thought, well, I suppose I'll be a zookeeper. I've got all this incredible study from university behind me now. And I found myself as an elephant keeper early in my career, always putting my hand up to do the zookeeper talks at lunchtime.
You were an elephant keeper? Really?
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
Sounds like a great job.
Yeah, it's like washing your car 3 times a day and shoveling bowling balls. It's physical. It's physical. But I discovered I wasn't a great keeper because I just wanted to talk to the zoo visitors all the time and tell them about the issues threatening species. And so that sort of led me into another path, which was campaigning. And campaigning led me into WWF. And here I am. There's nothing else I'd want to be doing. It's not always easy. You have moments where you win sometimes. As a highlight this year, we got a commitment from the Queensland government to retire all commercial gill nets from the Great Barrier Reef. Now, commercial gill nets have no place in a World Heritage Site. And the evidence, the devastation that they have on turtles, dugongs, marine species is so strong. That was an amazing day, when we finally, after years of campaigning and raising funds to purchase licenses and retire nets, Queensland government went, okay, we're going to do this properly and we'll retire all commercial gill nets. So that was a nice day. 2 weeks ago was a terrible day. I got word that logging had started up in Talaganda National Park, State Forest, Talaganda State Forest, which is one of the last remaining strongholds of greater gliders. WWF, we've directed over $300,000 worth of nest boxes with our partners into that landscape because it's so critical for greater gliders that were listed as endangered last year. It was an awful day. You're just thinking, why would you log a known stronghold of an endangered species where charities are investing hundreds of thousands of dollars to try to save them? So, you have good days and you have bad days in this field.
Where is that state forest?
New South Wales.
Right.
So that's one people can speak up on right now. Let Penny Sharp know that you'd like her to call in the agency leading that and cease logging in that area. It's just no justification to log endangered species habitat. We've got to be better than that.
Thank you for sharing that. It's testament to what we bring to life in these conversations is not only the complexity of some of the issues that our NGO partners are seeking to solve, but the extraordinary individuals who are deeply committed and passionate and there because they deeply care. And one thing we really hope to do and are doing through this series is to raise awareness around the complex work that NGOs do. There's often quite a simplistic understanding of the sector and without perhaps fully grasping how complex their work is. They're working in difficult environments, navigating civil and government, public and private. And so ultimately, as you've alluded to, those partnerships are really important to achieving your goals. So working together with ICO Change, we've raised over $62,000 and counting so far. Now, people might say that sounds like, a decent amount of money, not a fortune. Can you share, what does funds like that do? What does it help you achieve at World Wildlife Fund?
Yeah. I mean, and thank you for that support. You can do some great work with funds like that. We've directed those funds to our rewilding program. So we have landscapes in Australia that no longer are able to hold the species that they once had. And so when you do the work to regenerate country, it's lovely to think that the species will just come back. Sometimes they can't. We've decimated them to a point where they need a helping hand. And so we call that rewilding when we give that helping hand to species. So with the funds that came through from iChange, we were able to release platypus back into Royal National Park in New South Wales, which, it's an area that freshwater ecosystem where platypus should be. But post bushfires, post drought, they just got hit. It was just one thing after the other and they disappeared from that area. So we were able to direct those funds towards the team that need to do the work to get the platypus ready and rewilded there. As funds continue to come in, we're trying very hard to get eastern quolls rewilded in Boonaree National Park, working with government. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth undertaking, and we've got some things to trial, but it all costs funds. We have to pay for rangers to be out there monitoring. We've got to pay for the captive breeding of these species through it and support our partners. We've got to fund the actual transportation to get them out there, and we've got to fund a lot of the pre-work to get the reason the landscape rejected these species, or these species became extinct in that area, is because it wasn't no longer healthy. So we've got to actually get the health of the area back up. So it's costly rewilding. So yeah, thank you. It's been great being able to get that platypus project up and running.
And with more funding, biodiversity is an enormous challenge now in Australia. And can you give us a sense of sort of what some of the other endangered species in Australia and how just the size of this challenge, the biodiversity loss and, with 50x that level of funding, and of course you have sources from many places, like just how big is that issue in Australia? I mean, obviously the fires took an enormous toll on the number of animals in the wild. I think for those, to your point around fires and floods previously, I mean, Australians by and large deeply care about the natural world. We realise we live in a really beautiful country and increasingly a fragile one. How big is this issue around biodiversity loss?
It's huge. We're in a biodiversity crisis, and we don't use that word crisis lightly. We are a biodiverse nation, and our extinction rate is one of the worst extinction rates in the world, and it is the worst for mammal species covered in fur. So,
why is that?
It's a range of reasons. Introduced species are certainly taking their toll. So a lot of the mammals that we have already lost, around 35 mammals, a lot of those have been lost because we just haven't managed our landscapes well, and we haven't invested early enough in interventions to tackle feral species issues. So there's that, most certainly. We've also then got land clearing at unprecedented rates. We are a global deforestation hotspot. So Australia's clearing trees faster than any other developed nation in the world. A lot of Australians, we have good market research to show, they think, oh, that's an issue for the Amazon, an issue for Indonesia. It's an issue for Australia right here. So very hard to be able to sustain healthy wildlife populations when you are clearing landscape. So far across Queensland and New South Wales, there's good data to show greater than the size of Tasmania has been cleared on top of threatened species habitat, known threatened species habitat. That's just not all clearing. So it's huge, right? And it's fast, and it's faster than our species can evolve. And then we have things like climate change, which is creating these severe weather events, which is making it harder again. Bushfires certainly took its toll on a number of our threatened species. WWF has this really cool program. I love it. We've partnered with Google where we've put these camera traps all over the country. It's a national, it's called Eyes on Country. And, we're starting to see in some areas, some species bounce back, like dunnarts, for example, but we've got enough data to show that we can't underestimate the severity of those bushfires. We lost a lot of species, not just mammals, but reptiles, birds across those landscapes. I'm nervous about if we're going into El Nino, we end up getting those terrible conditions lining up again and we get metafires again. How many times our landscapes and our wildlife can take those sort of severe weather events before we lose entire species? And warming's having an impact. You look at grey-headed flying fox, for example. Every summer, the number of hot days that are really hot, those uncomfortable ones when we're in the house and we've got to have the aircon on, or we go to the cinemas because the home is too hot, they're increasing every summer, and we're actually seeing these mortality events where we've literally got bats dropping from the sky because they can have 1, 2, maybe 3 hot days in a row. They can't thermoregulate on day 4 or day 5. We've got some populations where 1/3 of the bats have literally died in one day because of warming. So it's climate change isn't that thing we're just going to see in the future. Certainly, we're going to see more loss, sadly, and we've got to stabilise climate and throw everything at it. But we're seeing the impacts of climate change on our biodiversity now.
And sadly, as I understand, the point is true. I mean, if we stopped emitting carbon tomorrow, a lot of this is still baked into the next 20, 30 years. And so we really need to act now. And just to return back to that initial point around, what I'm heartened is seeing businesses and increasingly understand the importance of actually, we're talking about stabilizing the systems upon which we live and work and consume. And so this is not a nice thing to do anymore. This is actually crucial to our long-term viability as a species on this planet. And I think that would have perhaps sounded like hubris a few years ago, but now there's a growing awareness from all sectors of society that just how critical this time is. So we're committed at I Equal Change to, one of our focuses is empowerment of women and girls, and there's some really interesting links of how that positively impacts climate change when girls are educated and able to stay at school and start businesses, and the whole series of interesting factors there, and also mitigating the climate crisis as much as possible. How can Change businesses continue to help your work?
Look, I mean, first of all, by starting to want to. Let's get serious and embed that as a value within your organization and start to make it part of your competitive advantage out there in the marketplace. I would suggest that you really get a strong handle on the impacts of your operations on biodiversity. There are a lot of businesses that do impact biodiversity. It's whether or not it's a dependency on paper sources. Let's make sure that it's, it's doing your bit from a chain of custody point of view, but then it's also starting to lean into what can your brand shine the spotlight on? A partnership like what HP has done is an incredible one. They're bringing a new voice to the deforestation issue. It's terrific, So can your brand, can your profile shine the spotlight on the need for more female Indigenous rangers in Australia? For example, or is it going to be a voice for just one species, one landscape, one seascape? Are you going to call for more Indigenous protected areas? There's so much that can be done, really. Can your business reward pastoralists and landowners that are doing the right thing? There's so many people that are well-intended out there that are starting to take regeneration very seriously and put it into practice on their private land. And so, can we get our procurement systems backing those people in and rewarding them? There's just so much that we can do.
I appreciate you mentioning that and all of that, because it seems that the conversation is slowly shifting towards kind of the immediate what's in it for us as a business, and I understand that as part of the system of business, towards how do we engage our stakeholders in a much broader way around our purpose? How do we bake it in authentically into who we are as a brand? How do we engage our staff? Most people, if not all, would say, I'd rather work for a company that is committed to being part of the solution.
That's right.
Rather than one that's just, it's product and promotion and away we go. I mean, it's just not sustainable anymore. And of course, consumers care. So when given that choice to support a business that gives back, that has a clear purpose versus one that doesn't, the choice for over 90% of consumers is very clear.
Yeah, it helps us with that war on talent because it's out there right now. It's real, isn't it? And I agree. I think it helps with staff retention as well.
Absolutely. Attracting and retaining great talent is really key now. They're asking that question. Well, actually, how are you contributing? What do you stand for? And senior executive teams need to have a very clear answer for that more than ever before, and are being held accountable. And as you say, everyone benefits from this. We're able to support the amazing work that you do. The businesses are able to meaningfully differentiate, and in doing so, we can create much needed funds to accelerate the impact that you're having. So for any businesses listening to today, World Wildlife Fund is one of the most loved and respected NGOs working globally in this space. And of course, unless we've somehow managed to have our head uniquely in our own sandpit, we're all aware of what's happening around the world. I mean, we don't need to look much further than the recent fires and current fires in Europe and what's potentially facing us in our looming summer in a few months' time. And so an incredible NGO to support if you want to come on board. And through Change, we have the tech, we have the partnership. There's a flow of content, that wonderful storytelling that Rachel and the team are able to provide back to us. So as a business, you can talk about the impact that you're having across your channels and bring it to life in a way that is engaging and inspiring for your customers and your staff. Rachel, so wonderful to have you with us today. I'm just curious, and this is a question I love to ask all of our guests. When you look back on your life, hopefully many years from now, what do you believe you'll feel most proud of?
I've been asked that question a few times and I love it. I used to pinpoint one particular campaign, like, getting certified sustainable palm oil into Australia or whatever. But I actually think it's going to be the teams I've helped build. I love leadership, and I love the strategies and the teams and the partnerships that and I dare say that this moment I'm in right now around sort of rallying people behind a nature positive future, getting corporates and government leaders and great scientists all rallying behind, a critical vision towards 2030 will be one of those things that I'm most proud of.
And may you succeed. And
thank you for your support.
No, absolutely. Thank you for doing what you do. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us here today. We've got one question from Instagram, which is, how do you measure the real world impact of the Rewilding Australia program?
Yeah, look at a few different ways. At the moment, a lot of our rewilding initiatives are quite embryonic, and so we're measuring whether or not the species are able to persevere and survive in the landscapes. That's a key measurement. We also have a look at, you expect when you introduce, for example, a bandicoot or small marsupial into an area, that soil health might increase, because a lot of them are, ecosystem engineers. They turn the soil over. So we look at other proxy measures, like whether or not we start to see rare orchids start to pop back up, or certain sort of flora indicators to show that overall the ecosystem is benefiting from having that species there. If it's an apex predator, which we would love to do more of, you start to see some of those pest species I mentioned earlier, cats, foxes, decrease, so you can actually get monitoring there as well. And then there's some social indicators. We work really hard to, wherever we can, employ Indigenous rangers. And then there can be ecotourism benefits, which we're not as good at measuring yet, but want to get better at.
Thank you. I think that also highlights the complexity of the work, and sometimes there isn't a really simple way to measure, but indeed it's a number of metrics which paints a much bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Measurement's important, so we know that actually the funds are really hard to raise. We've got to make sure we measure so we know we're having the impact we're intending. That's a good question.
Rachel, Lowry, thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone that supports WWF out there, or any charity that's doing great work. It's really important. Thanks so much.
Thank you.